The massive underground cavern stretching 47 feet beneath our modest Montana farmhouse, its ancient walls lined with gleaming veins of pure gold ore worth over $200 million, alongside geological surveys and mining claims dating back to the 1880s that would reveal the truth behind our valley's most legendary lost fortune. The discovery that would completely vindicate my mother's seemingly foolish $300 land purchase that everyone mocked, transform our family from welfare recipients to multi-millionaires overnight, and prove that sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden directly beneath the places everyone else overlooks. Before we dive into this incredible journey together, drop a comment telling me which state you're watching from today. And if stories about underdogs proving everyone wrong and life-changing discoveries fascinate you, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because tomorrow I'm sharing another shocking discovery story that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about so-called worthless properties. The brutal Montana winter of 2024 will forever be burned into my memory as the season that nearly destroyed what little my family had managed to build after decades of financial struggle. When our ramshackle farmhouse stood just hours away from complete structural collapse and we had exactly $847 in our bank account to somehow miracle our way out of homelessness, the frozen ground beneath our property held a secret that would transform our desperate circumstances into wealth beyond anything 3 generations of Crawford women had ever dared to imagine possible. My name is Sarah Beth Crawford, and I'm the daughter of the woman everyone in Copper Ridge, Montana called Crazy Linda, the single mother who shocked our entire small town of 1,847 people when she used her last $300 from a disability settlement to buy 12 acres of what every local expert, real estate agent, and farmer declared to be the most worthless piece of scrubland in Willowbrook County. What I'm about to share with you is the absolutely true story of how my desperate attempt to dig a emergency foundation to save our collapsing house led to the discovery of one of the richest gold deposits ever found on private land in North America, worth more than most people earn in 10 lifetimes. This isn't just a story about finding gold buried in our backyard. It's about a family that refused to accept defeat when everyone from the bank manager to our own relatives said we were destined to fail. About a mother whose seemingly insane real estate decision turned out to be the most brilliant investment in our county's history, and about learning that sometimes the most valuable things in life are hidden in the exact places that everyone else has written off as completely hopeless and beyond salvation. The 12 acres of seemingly barren Montana scrubland that had been nothing but a source of community ridicule and crushing financial burden for our family would soon reveal that it had been protecting our salvation all along, waiting patiently beneath layers of soil and decades of accumulated doubt for the moment when we would be desperate enough to dig deeper than anyone had ever bothered to look in the 140 years since the original homesteaders abandoned this land as agriculturally impossible. But to understand how a single mother with 3 children, no husband, no college education, and no money could make a land purchase that would eventually be valued at over $200 million, you need to understand the kind of woman who would spend her last $300 on property that literally everyone told her was throwing money away. You need to understand Linda Mae Crawford, a woman whose determination would prove stronger than poverty, whose intuition would prove more accurate than expert opinions, and whose faith in possibilities would prove more valuable than any financial education. Linda Mae Crawford's story began not with success, but with the kind of devastating personal tragedy that destroys most people's ability to dream about better futures. She was born Linda Mae Hutchinson in 1978 in the small farming community of Millerville, North Dakota, the youngest daughter of wheat farmers whose family had worked the same land for 4 generations. Her childhood was spent learning that success came through hard work, careful planning, and respect for the land that provided everything a family needed to survive and prosper in the harsh northern plains environment. Linda's early life followed the traditional patterns of rural American families. She excelled in school, particularly in mathematics and earth sciences, showing an intuitive understanding of geology and land management that impressed her teachers and suggested a possible future in agricultural science or environmental studies. She was planning to attend North Dakota State University on an academic scholarship when her world was destroyed by a single moment of senseless violence that changed everything she thought she knew about fairness, planning, and the reliability of the future. On a warm evening in May 1997, just 3 weeks before Linda's high school graduation, a drunk driver traveling at over 90 miles per hour struck the family car as Linda, her parents, and her older sister were returning from Linda's academic awards ceremony. The impact killed both parents instantly and left her sister permanently paralyzed from the waist down. Linda survived with severe back injuries, a traumatic brain injury, and emotional trauma that would take years to heal.
The drunk driver was underinsured, leaving the family with massive medical bills, funeral expenses, and legal costs that consumed the family farm, the family home, and every asset that 4 generations of Hutchinson farmers had accumulated through decades of careful work and conservative financial management. Within 6 months of the accident, Linda and her disabled sister found themselves homeless, penniless, and completely dependent on government assistance programs that provided survival but offered no path toward rebuilding what they had lost. Linda spent the next 8 years battling through physical therapy, psychological counseling, and the complex bureaucracy of disability services while trying to care for her sister and complete her interrupted education through online programs and community college courses. The academic scholarship she had earned was gone. Her plans for university study were impossible, and her future seemed limited to minimum wage jobs and permanent dependence on government assistance programs. But Linda possessed something that couldn't be destroyed by tragedy, poverty, or bureaucratic obstacles, an unshakable belief that land ownership was the foundation of security and independence. Despite having no money, no credit, and no realistic prospects for conventional real estate financing, Linda spent years studying property records, auction notices, and tax sale listings throughout North Dakota, Montana, and Minnesota, looking for opportunities that others had missed or dismissed as worthless. Linda's first break came in 2005 when she discovered that she was eligible for Veterans Land Purchase Assistance through a program she had never heard of based on her late father's military service during the Vietnam era. The program provided small loans for rural property purchases to children of eligible veterans, but the properties had to meet specific criteria that made most desirable farmland too expensive to qualify. Linda spent months researching available properties within her limited budget range, focusing on land that had been abandoned, foreclosed, or otherwise written off by conventional buyers. She was looking for property that had potential value that others couldn't see, land that might have hidden assets, development possibilities, or agricultural potential that had been overlooked by previous owners and current market evaluations. The property that would change everything was listed in the Willowbrook County tax sale records as Parcel 47B, 12 acres, unimproved, no structures, no utilities, agricultural use prohibited due to soil conditions, mineral rights unknown, access road unmaintained. The county assessor had valued the property at $280, and it had been abandoned by 3 different owners over the previous 30 years, each of whom had purchased it hoping to develop some kind of agricultural or residential use, only to discover that the soil was too rocky, the drainage was too poor, and the location was too remote for any practical purpose. But Linda saw something in the property description that others had missed. The notation, mineral rights unknown, suggested that previous owners had never conducted proper surveys to determine what might be beneath the surface. The The repeated failures at agricultural development indicated that the soil contained something that prevented normal farming, but that something might be valuable rather than problematic. Linda made the 340-mile drive from her cramped apartment in Fargo to Copper Ridge, Montana, in her unreliable 1994 Honda Civic to personally inspect the property that everyone said was worthless. What she found was 12 acres of rolling hills covered with scrub brush and scattered with rocky outcroppings that gleamed with metallic flecks when the afternoon sun hit them at the right angle. The metallic gleaming that caught Linda's attention wasn't fool's gold or worthless mineral deposits. It was actual gold ore visible on the surface, overlooked by decades of potential buyers who didn't know what they were seeing. Linda's childhood on a wheat farm in mining country had taught her to recognize the geological signs that indicated valuable mineral deposits, and everything about this property suggested that previous owners had been trying to farm on top of one of Montana's undiscovered gold deposits. Linda spent 3 days camping on the property, walking every acre, collecting rock samples, and documenting the geological features that convinced her this land contained valuable minerals that could provide the financial security she had been seeking since losing everything in that terrible car accident 8 years earlier. She also discovered that the property included water rights to 2 seasonal streams and bordered on federal forest land that would prevent commercial development from destroying the natural beauty that made the area valuable for residential or recreational purposes. The decision to purchase the property required Linda to spend literally every dollar she possessed. The $300 purchase price represented her entire disability settlement from the car accident, leaving her with no money for moving expenses, no funds for property development, and no resources to conduct professional geological surveys that might confirm or disprove her theories about the land's mineral potential.
Everyone Linda consulted about the purchase told her she was making a terrible mistake. The county extension agent warned her that the soil was unsuitable for any agricultural use. The local real estate agent told her that the property had no resale value and would be impossible to develop or improve. Her social worker advised her that spending her settlement money on remote Montana land would make her ineligible for certain assistance programs and could jeopardize her housing stability. Even Linda's disabled sister begged her not to make the purchase, arguing that $300 could pay for medical expenses, transportation, or other immediate needs that would improve their quality of life without the enormous risk of investing everything in property that might prove to be completely worthless. But Linda had learned through 8 years of poverty and struggle that playing it safe was actually the riskiest strategy of all. Government assistance programs provided survival, but never provided the opportunity to build wealth or achieve genuine independence. Minimum wage jobs offered income, but never offered the chance to accumulate assets that could provide long-term security for her family's future. Land ownership, even land that others considered worthless, represented the possibility of building something permanent that couldn't be taken away by bureaucratic decisions, economic recessions, or personal tragedies. Even if the property never proved valuable for mineral extraction, it would provide a place where Linda could establish a home, grow her own food, and create the kind of self-sufficient lifestyle that would reduce her dependence on systems that had already failed her once. Linda completed the property purchase in November 2005, using her disability settlement to pay the $300 purchase price, plus $127 in legal fees and documentation costs. She moved to Copper Ridge with her sister in December 2005, renting a small apartment in town while making plans to develop their property into a homestead that could support both of them independently of government assistance programs. The first 5 years of Montana life were incredibly difficult for Linda and her sister. Linda worked multiple minimum wage jobs: grocery store cashier, restaurant server, cleaning lady for local businesses, while spending every free hour clearing brush, removing rocks, and preparing areas of their property for construction of basic shelter and agricultural facilities. Linda's sister despite her disability, contributed by managing their finances, researching government programs that could provide assistance with property development, and maintaining their rented apartment while Linda spent long days working on the land. Together, they lived on less than $18,000 per year, saving every possible dollar to invest in tools, materials, and infrastructure that would eventually allow them to live on their property full-time. In 2010, Linda met Robert James Crawford, a widowed construction worker who had moved to Montana from Oregon after losing his wife to cancer. Robert was impressed by Linda's determination and work ethic, and he possessed the construction skills that Linda needed to develop their property into a livable homestead. They married in 2011, combining their limited resources and creating the partnership that would make Linda's homesteading dreams achievable. Robert brought construction expertise, some basic tools, and a small savings account to the marriage. But more importantly, he brought belief in Linda's vision for their property's potential. While others continued to mock Linda's worthless land purchase, Robert could see the possibilities she had recognized: the natural beauty, the water rights, the mineral potential, and the independence that land ownership could provide for their growing family. Linda and Robert's first child, my older brother Michael Stone Crawford, was born in 2012. I followed in 2014, and our youngest sister, Emma Rose Crawford, was born in 2016. By this time, Linda and Robert had built a modest mobile home on their property and were living full-time on the land that everyone still considered worthless, but that had become the foundation of our family's hopes for building something better than the poverty and uncertainty that had defined Linda's earlier life. The mobile home that Linda and Robert established on their property was far from luxurious, but it represented something that Linda had never experienced since losing her childhood home in 1997, a place that belonged to her family completely, that couldn't be taken away by landlords, government agencies, or financial catastrophes beyond her control. The property provided space for a large garden that supplied most of our family's vegetables throughout the year. The seasonal streams provided water for irrigation and household use. The surrounding forest provided firewood that heated our home during Montana's harsh winters. Most importantly, the land provided the security and independence that Linda allowed to focus on raising her children rather than worrying constantly about rent, evictions, or other housing uncertainties. But even as our family was building a stable, self-sufficient life on Linda's worthless property, the ridicule from the local community continued. Other families in Copper Ridge had achieved success through conventional approaches: education, steady employment, home mortgages, and traditional investment strategies. Linda's approach of buying abandoned land and trying to create value through sweat equity struck many people as naive, risky, and destined for failure.
The local bank manager frequently reminded Linda that her property had no resale value and couldn't be used as collateral for business loans or home improvement financing. Real estate agents told prospective buyers that the Crawford property was an example of what happened when people made emotional rather than practical decisions about land purchases. Even some of our neighbors suggested that Linda was setting a bad example for her children by pursuing unrealistic dreams instead of accepting the limitations that came with her economic circumstances. But Linda had learned something during her years of poverty and struggle that her critics had never experienced: that conventional wisdom often reflected conventional limitations rather than actual possibilities. The same experts who called her land purchase foolish had never spent time studying the property, researching its history, or imagining ways that its unique characteristics might create value. Linda continued developing our property throughout the 2010s, adding infrastructure, improving the soil, and creating systems that increased our family's self-sufficiency while reducing our dependence on outside resources. She established beehives that produced honey for sale at local farmers markets. She raised chickens that provided eggs and meat for our family and surplus for sale to neighbors. She created a workshop where she repaired furniture and household items that she sold through online marketplaces. Every improvement Linda made to our property was designed not just to meet our immediate needs, but to create long-term value that would benefit our family for generations. She planted fruit trees that would mature as her children grew up.
She established perennial crops that would provide annual income without requiring replanting. She built structures using techniques that would last for decades with minimal maintenance. By 2020, our family was living comfortably on property that had cost $300, but was providing the foundation for a lifestyle that would have cost thousands of dollars per month to maintain in town. We had our own water supply, our own food production, our own energy systems, and our own sources of supplemental income that made us far more financially secure than families with higher incomes but higher expenses. Linda's vindication seemed complete when the COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated the value of self-sufficiency and rural living. While urban families struggled with job losses, supply chain disruptions, and social isolation, our family was largely insulated from the economic chaos because we had built systems that provided for our needs independently of the larger economy. Our garden provided fresh food when grocery stores were experiencing shortages. Our remote location provided safety and space when cities were experiencing lockdowns and social unrest. Our diverse income sources provided stability when traditional employers were laying off workers. Linda's seemingly foolish decision to buy worthless land had created exactly the kind of security and independence that families throughout America were desperately seeking during the pandemic. But Linda's greatest vindication was still ahead, hidden beneath 47 feet of Montana soil, waiting for the crisis that would force us to dig deeper than anyone had ever dug before. The geological treasure that would transform our family from rural homesteaders into multi-millionaires was patiently waiting for the moment when we would be desperate enough to look beyond the surface value of Linda's incredible land purchase. The foundation problems that would lead to our life-changing discovery began during the record-breaking winter of 2023-2024, when temperatures dropped to -43 degrees F and remained below -20 degrees F for 6 consecutive weeks. The extreme cold caused frost damage to the concrete footings that supported our mobile home, creating structural instability that threatened to make our home uninhabitable within months. By March 2024, our family was facing the greatest crisis since Linda's original decision to buy the property. Professional foundation repair would cost at least $15,000 that we didn't have. Moving the mobile home would require purchasing or renting different property that would end Linda's dream of land ownership and financial independence. Doing nothing would mean watching our home collapse while we scrambled to find alternative housing that we couldn't afford. Linda made the decision that would change everything. Instead of trying to repair the damaged foundation, we would dig a full basement beneath our existing home, creating additional living space while solving the structural problems that threatened our family's stability. The project would require us to excavate deeper than anyone had ever dug on our property, but Linda was convinced that we could complete the work ourselves using rental equipment and techniques that Robert had learned during his construction career. What we discovered when we began digging that basement would prove that Linda's intuition about our property's hidden value was even more accurate than she had dared to hope, and that her $300 investment would eventually be worth more than most people earn in several lifetimes.
The devastating Montana winter of 2024 began like any other harsh season in the northern Rockies, with early November snowfall and temperatures that dropped steadily through December into the kind of bone-chilling cold that tests every structure, every heating system, and every family's ability to survive in one of America's most unforgiving climates. But what started as typical Montana weather quickly escalated into a perfect storm of catastrophic events that would threaten to destroy everything my family had spent 19 years building on Linda's 12 acres of supposedly worthless scrubland. The first sign of serious trouble came on January 8, 2024, when our main water line froze solid, despite the heat tape and insulation that had protected it through previous winters. The temperature had dropped to -38 degrees Fahrenheit and remained there for 4 consecutive days, creating frost penetration deeper than anyone in our area had experienced in over 30 years. When the pipes finally thawed in late January, we discovered that the freeze-thaw cycle had caused multiple ruptures in our underground water system, leaving us without reliable running water just as the coldest part of winter was arriving. Emergency repairs to our water system cost $1,247 that we had to borrow from Linda's sister,
depleting our small emergency fund and leaving us financially vulnerable just as other systems throughout our property began showing the strain of the unprecedented weather conditions. Our backup generator, which provided electricity during power outages, suffered mechanical failure during the first week of February when temperatures dropped below -40 degrees Fahrenheit for 6 consecutive nights. The repair estimate of $890 represented nearly 3 weeks of income from Linda's part-time job at the Copper Ridge grocery store. But the real crisis began on February 14th when the extreme cold finally overwhelmed the concrete foundation that had supported our mobile home for over a decade. The sound of cracking concrete woke us at 3:17 a.m., a sharp, explosive noise that Robert immediately recognized as structural failure. By dawn, we could see that frost heave had lifted portions of our foundation, creating gaps and cracks that threatened the integrity of our entire home. The mobile home that had provided our family with stability and security for 13 years was suddenly sitting on an unstable foundation that was deteriorating daily as the freeze-thaw cycle continued. Doors wouldn't close properly, windows cracked from structural stress, and the floor developed a noticeable slope that made walking through our home feel like navigating a funhouse. Most alarming, the electrical connections were being stressed by the shifting foundation, creating potential fire hazards that made our home increasingly dangerous to occupy. Robert's construction experience told him immediately that this wasn't a problem we could ignore or postpone until spring. Foundation failure in a mobile home creates a cascade of structural problems that accelerate rapidly once they begin. Without immediate intervention, our home would become uninhabitable within weeks, leaving our family of 5 homeless during the coldest part of a Montana winter with no resources to secure alternative housing. The unprofessional estimates we received for foundation repair ranged from $12,000 to $18,000, depending on whether we chose basic stabilization or complete foundation replacement. The higher-end option would require lifting the mobile home, excavating the damaged foundation, pouring new concrete footings, and reinstalling all utilities, a process that would take several weeks during which our family would need temporary housing that we couldn't afford. Even the basic stabilization option was far beyond our financial capabilities. Our savings account contained exactly $847, accumulated through months of careful budgeting and sacrifice. Linda's job at the grocery store provided $1,100 per month, while Robert's seasonal construction work generated between $800 and $1,400 per month, depending on weather conditions and available projects. Our total household income averaged less than $2,800 per month, leaving no margin for major unexpected expenses after covering basic necessities. The local bank manager, who had spent years reminding Linda that her property couldn't serve as loan collateral because of its limited market value, confirmed that we didn't qualify for emergency home repair loans or any other conventional financing options. Our credit scores, while not terrible, weren't high enough for unsecured personal loans large enough to cover foundation repairs. The property that Linda had purchased for $300 still carried an assessed value too low to support meaningful borrowing against our equity. Home insurance provided no relief because foundation problems were classified as maintenance issues rather than covered disasters. The extreme weather that had caused our foundation failure was considered normal Montana winter conditions rather than an insurable catastrophe. We were entirely on our own, with no financial safety net and no obvious solutions to a problem that threatened to destroy our family's housing security. Linda's sister, who had helped with the waterline repairs, made it clear that she couldn't provide additional financial assistance for foundation work. Her own fixed income from disability payments was already stretched thin, and lending us over $1,000 for the waterline repairs had depleted her small emergency fund. Other family members lived too far away or faced their own financial challenges that made large loans impossible.
The stress of our housing crisis was affecting every member of our family in different ways. Michael, my 12-year-old brother, began having nightmares about our home collapsing while we slept. Emma, who was only 8, started asking constantly whether we were going to have to move away from the only home she had ever known. I found myself lying awake at night, listening to the house creak and shift, wondering if the sounds indicated further structural deterioration. Linda and Robert tried to maintain optimistic attitudes around us children, but we could see the strain in their faces and hear the whispered conversations about impossible choices and diminishing options.
The weight of potentially losing our home was especially devastating for Linda, who had sacrificed everything to achieve the land ownership and housing security that had been stolen from her by the car accident that killed her parents. The possibility of losing our home felt like watching Linda's 19-year journey from poverty to independence unravel in a matter of weeks. Everything she had worked for, the self-sufficiency, the stability, the proof that unconventional approaches could create lasting security, was threatened by a structural problem that we lacked the resources to solve through normal means. Local contractors confirmed what Robert already knew about mobile home foundation problems. Temporary fixes wouldn't solve the underlying issue, and without proper repair, the structural damage would continue accelerating until our home became completely uninhabitable. We had perhaps 6 weeks before the foundation failure would force us to evacuate, and no realistic prospects for securing the financing needed for professional repairs. The cruel irony of our situation wasn't lost on anyone in our family. Here we were, living on property that provided food security, energy independence, and a lifestyle that many urban families envied, but facing homelessness because of a mechanical problem that required cash resources we didn't possess. Our wealth in terms of land, skills, and self-sufficiency meant nothing when confronted with a crisis that demanded immediate financial solutions. Linda spent hours researching alternative approaches to foundation problems, studying online resources, consulting with experienced contractors, and exploring every possible way to address our crisis without spending money we didn't have. She investigated do-it-yourself foundation repair techniques, temporary stabilization methods, and emergency housing alternatives that might buy us time to develop long-term solutions. The research process revealed that our specific combination of soil conditions, climate factors, and mobile home construction created challenges that were particularly difficult to address through conventional approaches. The clay-heavy soil around our home retained moisture that contributed to frost heave problems. The extreme temperature variations in our area created expansion and contraction cycles that stressed foundation materials beyond their design limits. The age and construction style of our mobile home made it particularly vulnerable to foundation movement. But Linda's research also revealed possibilities that professional contractors hadn't mentioned, perhaps because they involved approaches that went far beyond typical repair work. Instead of simply fixing the damaged foundation, we could excavate a full basement beneath our mobile home, creating additional living space while solving the foundation problems permanently. The project would be complex and labor-intensive, but it wouldn't require the specialized materials and professional expertise that made conventional repairs so expensive. Excavating a basement would allow us to place our home's foundation well below the frost line, eliminating future problems with freeze-thaw cycles. The basement would provide storm shelter, storage space, and potential for additional bedrooms that would give our growing family more comfortable living arrangements. Most importantly, we could complete the work ourselves using rented equipment and techniques that Robert had learned during his years in construction. The basement excavation approach would still require significant expenses for equipment rental, concrete materials, and utility modifications, but the total cost would be spread over several months rather than due immediately. We could rent excavation equipment for short periods, complete sections of the work incrementally, and purchase materials as our budget allowed, rather than financing the entire project at once. Linda's proposal to dig our own basement seemed ambitious to the point of impossibility. None of us had experience with major excavation projects, and the technical challenges of working around existing utilities while maintaining structural stability for an occupied mobile home were formidable. The decision to attempt the basement excavation represented a huge gamble for our family. If we succeeded, we would solve our housing crisis while creating additional living space that would improve our quality of life for decades. If we failed,
We might damage our home beyond repair, destroy our utilities, or create safety hazards that would force us to evacuate even sooner than the original foundation problems would have required. Linda made the final decision during a family meeting on March 3, 2024. She reminded us that our family had always succeeded through approaches that others considered impossible or impractical. Her original decision to buy 12 acres of worthless land had seemed equally risky, but it had provided the foundation for 19 years of stability and independence. The basement excavation was simply the next step in our family's tradition of creating solutions through determination, rather than depending on systems that had already failed us. The equipment rental would cost $340 per day for the excavator and $180 per day for the soil removal equipment. We planned to rent the heavy machinery for 3 separate weekends, completing different phases of the excavation during each rental period. The concrete materials would cost approximately $2,400, purchased in stages as we progressed through different aspects of the construction. Total project cost would approach $4,000, but spread over 4 months rather than due immediately. Linda arranged to work additional hours at the grocery store, while Robert committed to taking every construction job offered during the spring season, regardless of how small or inconvenient. Michael, Emma, and I would contribute by handling all the hand-digging, soil-moving, and cleanup work that didn't require heavy machinery. Our entire family would dedicate every available hour to the basement project until it was completed. The first equipment rental was scheduled for March 16th, giving us 2 weeks to complete preparatory work, finalize our excavation plan, and gather the tools and materials needed for the initial phase of digging. Linda spent those 2 weeks in a state of nervous excitement, oscillating between confidence that we were about to solve our housing crisis and anxiety that we were about to destroy the only home our family had ever owned.
But first, we had to survive the next 6 months of backbreaking labor, technical challenges, and constant uncertainty about whether our ambitious plan would save our home or destroy it. The excavation project that would change our lives forever was about to begin, and none of us could have imagined what we were about to discover buried beneath the Montana soil that everyone else had written off as completely worthless. To truly understand how Linda's seemingly foolish $300 land purchase would eventually lead to the discovery of a $200 million gold deposit, you need to understand the extraordinary circumstances that brought the original homesteader to our 12 acres of Montana scrubland and why he made construction choices that would prove crucial to protecting an underground fortune for over 140 years. The story of our property begins not with Linda's desperate gamble in 2005, but with another desperate gamble made by Jeremiah Thaddeus Blackwood in 1881 during the height of Montana's gold rush fever. Blackwood was a former Union Army engineer who had survived the Civil War's bloodiest battles and emerged with specialized knowledge of military excavation, underground fortifications, and geological surveying that would prove invaluable in the untamed Montana Territory. Jeremiah Blackwood arrived in Montana in the summer of 1880, following reports of gold discoveries in the Willowbrook Valley that were attracting prospectors from throughout the American West. Unlike most gold seekers who focused on stream beds and surface deposits, Blackwood's military engineering background had taught him to recognize geological formations that indicated deeper, more substantial mineral veins that required systematic excavation rather than simple panning techniques. Blackwood spent his first Montana winter in the rough mining camp of Copper Ridge, studying the geological patterns of successful claims while developing theories about larger ore deposits that had been overlooked by prospectors who lacked technical training in geology and engineering. His military experience with underground construction had taught him that the most valuable resources were often buried far deeper than casual exploration could reveal. The specific parcel that would eventually become Linda's property caught Blackwood's attention because of its unique geological features and strategic location relative to proven mining areas throughout the Willowbrook Valley. The rolling hills contained exposed rock formations that showed clear evidence of the same mineral veins that had produced major strikes in neighboring areas, but the surface deposits were too scattered and low-grade to attract conventional prospecting efforts. Blackwood recognized that the scattered surface deposits were probably indicators of a substantial underground ore body that would require deep shaft mining to access profitably. The property's location at the intersection of two seasonal streams provided the water access essential for large-scale mining operations, while its elevation and terrain offered protection from flash floods that had destroyed several mining camps in lower-lying areas. Most importantly, Blackwood understood that successful mining in Montana required not just finding ore, but developing the infrastructure to extract and process it efficiently. The property's timber resources could provide materials for constructing mine shafts, processing facilities, and worker housing. The nearby access to existing transportation routes would enable shipping ore to processing centers in larger towns without the prohibitive costs that made many remote claims unprofitable. Blackwood filed his homestead claim on 160 acres that included our current 12-acre parcel in March 1881, beginning construction of what he intended to be Montana's most sophisticated and profitable mining operation. His military engineering experience enabled him to design excavation and processing systems far more advanced than the simple prospecting techniques being used by other miners in the area. The mining operation that Blackwood established differed from conventional Montana mining in fundamental ways that reflected his engineering expertise and military background. Instead of focusing on quick extraction of easily accessible surface deposits, Blackwood developed a comprehensive plan for systematic exploration and development that could support decades of profitable mining from deep underground ore bodies. Blackwood's first major construction project was the excavation of an exploratory shaft that would reveal the extent and quality of mineral deposits throughout his property. The shaft location was carefully selected based on geological surveys that indicated the highest probability of encountering substantial ore veins at manageable depths. The excavation techniques he employed were based on military engineering principles that emphasized safety, structural integrity, and long-term durability. The exploratory shaft that Blackwood sank during the summer of 1881 exceeded his most optimistic expectations. At a depth of 37 feet, his excavation encountered what geological surveys would later describe as one of the richest gold ore veins ever discovered in Montana Territory. The vein extended in multiple directions from the main shaft, indicating an underground ore body of extraordinary size and value. Blackwood's military training had taught him the importance of security when dealing with valuable resources that could attract claim jumpers, thieves, and other threats to mining operations. The gold deposit he had discovered was so rich and extensive that news of its existence would certainly attract unwanted attention that could jeopardize his ability to develop the claim safely and profitably.
Instead of immediately beginning large-scale extraction that would reveal the extent of his discovery, Blackwood made the strategic decision to expand his exploratory excavation into a concealed underground mining complex that could operate without attracting attention from competing prospectors or potential thieves. His military experience with underground fortifications provided the expertise needed to create sophisticated concealment systems. The underground complex that Blackwood constructed during 1881 and 1882 represented the most advanced mining engineering ever attempted in Montana Territory. The system included multiple access shafts, extensive underground chambers for ore processing and storage, sophisticated ventilation systems, and security measures that could protect the operation from discovery or attack by hostile forces. Blackwood's concealment strategy was based on military principles of camouflage and deception that made his mining operation nearly invisible from surface observations. The main access points were disguised as ordinary farm buildings and root cellars. The ore processing areas were located entirely underground to eliminate noise, dust, and other indicators that would reveal mining activity to casual observers. The underground chambers that Blackwood excavated were designed not just for immediate mining needs,
but for long-term ore storage and processing that could continue operating even during periods of external threats or transportation disruptions. The chambers included sophisticated drainage systems that prevented flooding, ventilation systems that maintained air quality, and structural supports that could withstand cave-ins or other geological instabilities. Blackwood's mining operation proved extraordinarily profitable during its first 2 years of production. The gold ore he extracted was so rich that even small-scale processing generated enough revenue to fund continued expansion of his underground complex, while providing substantial profits that he invested in additional mining equipment and security measures. But Blackwood's success also attracted exactly the kind of unwanted attention he had tried to avoid through his concealment strategies. By 1883, rumors of his exceptional ore quality had spread throughout Montana's mining community, attracting prospectors who began exploring areas around his homestead, looking for similar deposits. More ominously, organized gangs of claim jumpers and mine thieves had begun targeting successful operations throughout the territory. The specific threat that ended Blackwood's mining career came from the Copper Ridge Gang, a group of violent criminals who had been systematically attacking isolated mining claims throughout the Willowbrook Valley during 1883. The gang's strategy involved forcing legitimate claim holders off their property through intimidation and violence, then operating the claims themselves until the ore was exhausted or law enforcement intervention became unavoidable. In September 1883, the Copper Ridge Gang demanded that Blackwood abandon his homestead and mining operation, threatening to kill him and destroy his property if he refused to comply. Blackwood's military experience had taught him that fighting a guerrilla war against numerically superior forces was rarely successful, especially when protecting a fixed position that enemies could attack at times and places of their choosing. Faced with the choice between abandoning his valuable mining operation or risking death in a conflict he was unlikely to survive, Blackwood made a decision that reflected both his military pragmatism and his engineering expertise. Instead of simply fleeing and allowing the gang to discover and loot his underground complex, he would conceal the entire mining operation so thoroughly that even extensive searching would fail to reveal its existence. The concealment project that Blackwood undertook during October and November 1883 represented the most sophisticated camouflage operation ever attempted in Montana territory. Using techniques developed for military engineering applications, Blackwood sealed and disguised his underground mining complex so completely that no surface evidence remained to indicate its existence. The main access shafts were filled with carefully arranged rocks and soil that appeared to be natural geological formations. The underground chambers were sealed with stone and timber supports designed to prevent cave-ins while making excavation from above extremely difficult and time-consuming. The entire site was landscaped to appear as undisturbed wilderness that had never been developed for mining or any other purpose. Blackwood's most ingenious concealment technique involved creating false geological indicators that would mislead future prospectors who might investigate his property. He planted low-grade ore samples and fool's gold deposits in areas that would attract attention away from his actual mining sites, while carefully removing all traces of the high-grade ore that indicated the true extent of his underground treasure. The final phase of Blackwood's concealment project involved creating detailed maps and documentation that would allow him to relocate and reopen his mining operation if he ever returned to Montana territory. The maps were encoded using military cipher techniques that made them meaningless to anyone who lacked the specific keys needed for translation. The documentation was hidden in multiple secure locations throughout his property. Blackwood completed his concealment work in early December 1883,
transforming his sophisticated mining operation into apparently worthless scrubland that showed no evidence of valuable mineral deposits or previous development. The underground complex that contained hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of gold ore and mining equipment was sealed beneath soil and rocks that would discourage casual investigation.
In mid-December 1883, Blackwood abandoned his Montana homestead and disappeared from territorial records, leaving behind no indication of his destination or intentions. Local residents assumed he'd been driven off by the Copper Ridge Gang, like several other miners who had abandoned their claims during the same period. The property reverted to territorial control and was eventually made available for homesteading by other settlers. The Copper Ridge Gang spent several weeks searching Blackwood's abandoned property for evidence of the mining operation that had generated rumors of exceptional ore quality. Their searches revealed nothing more valuable than the scattered surface deposits and fool's gold samples that Blackwood had planted as decoys. After finding no evidence of significant mineral wealth, the gang concluded that Blackwood's reputation had been exaggerated and moved on to more promising targets. Over the following decades, Blackwood's property was claimed and abandoned by multiple homesteaders who attempted to develop it for agricultural use without success. The soil conditions that had been created by Blackwood's mining activities made conventional farming difficult, while the scattered low-grade ore samples discouraged serious prospecting efforts. Each failed homesteading attempt further established the property's reputation as worthless land that was unsuitable for any productive use. The property records from 1884 through 1920 show a consistent pattern of short-term ownership followed by abandonment, with each new owner apparently unaware of the previous mining activity or the possibility that substantial mineral wealth might remain hidden beneath the surface. The concealment techniques that Blackwood had developed proved so effective that even determined searching failed to reveal evidence of the underground complex. By 1920, Blackwood's property had been abandoned for so long that county records classified it as agricultural land, unsuitable for farming, mineral potential unknown, no structures or improvements. The assessment reflected the complete success of Blackwood's concealment project. His sophisticated mining operation had been so thoroughly hidden that its very existence had been forgotten. The underground complex that Blackwood had sealed in 1883 remained intact throughout the decades of surface abandonment, protected by the same geological conditions that had originally made the site attractive for mining. The natural drainage patterns prevented water accumulation that could damage stored ore or mining equipment. The stable soil conditions prevented cave-ins or other structural failures that could destroy the concealed chambers. Most importantly, the underground environment provided perfect preservation conditions for the gold ore that Blackwood had stored pending future extraction. Unlike surface deposits that could be degraded by weather exposure, the concealed ore remained in pristine condition, increasing in value as gold prices rose throughout the 20th century. The documentation that Blackwood had hidden throughout his property also remained intact, though its cipher encoding made it meaningless to the occasional treasure hunters or mineral rights speculators who discovered fragments over the years. Without the specific translation keys that Blackwood had taken with him, the maps and technical documents appeared to be worthless papers left behind by an unsuccessful prospector. When Linda purchased the property in 2005, she was unknowingly acquiring not just 12 acres of worthless scrubland, but also ownership of one of Montana's most valuable undiscovered gold deposits, protected by concealment systems that had successfully hidden its existence for over 120 years. The metallic gleaming that had attracted her attention during her original property inspection was actually high-grade gold ore that Blackwood had missed during his concealment project. The seasonal streams that Linda valued for their water rights were actually part of the natural drainage system that had kept Blackwood's underground complex dry and structurally stable for more than a century. The rocky outcroppings that made farming difficult were actually the disguised access points to underground chambers containing hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of gold ore and historical mining equipment. The foundation problems that had forced our family to undertake emergency excavation would soon reveal that Linda's intuition about her property's hidden value was more accurate than even she had imagined.
The basement project that we were beginning out of desperate necessity would eventually break through into Blackwood's concealed underground complex, revealing treasures that had been waiting 140 years for someone determined enough to dig deeper than anyone had dared to dig before. Jeremiah Blackwood's military engineering expertise and strategic concealment project had created the perfect conditions for preserving extraordinary mineral wealth until the moment when another desperate gambler would be forced by circumstances to excavate deeper than anyone had dared to dig before. The foundation crisis that threatened our family's security was actually the key that would unlock secrets worth more than most families could spend in several lifetimes. But first, Linda's intuition and our family's determination would have to overcome 140 years of accumulated doubt about property that everyone knew was worthless. The treasure that Blackwood had hidden so carefully was about to be discovered by people who understood that sometimes the most valuable things in life are buried in the places that everyone else has given up on as hopeless.
While Jeremiah Blackwood's perfectly concealed mining operation lay hidden beneath Montana soil, waiting for someone desperate enough to dig deeper than conventional wisdom suggested was worthwhile, the surface of our property was about to experience its own dramatic transformation through a series of failed homesteading attempts that would unknowingly add additional layers of protection to the underground treasure that would one day save our family from financial ruin. The first serious attempt to develop Blackwood's abandoned property came in 1895, when Norwegian emigrant Astrid Magnolia Thornburg claimed the 160-acre homestead as part of the federal government's continued efforts to encourage agricultural settlement throughout Montana Territory. Astrid arrived in Copper Ridge with her 3 young children, her elderly father-in-law, and the kind of fierce determination that characterized Scandinavian immigrants who had succeeded in transforming Minnesota's harsh wilderness into productive farmland. Astrid Thornburg's background included extensive experience with the challenging agricultural conditions that characterized Northern European farming, where short growing seasons, poor soil, and extreme weather had taught generations of farmers to develop innovative techniques for creating productivity in environments that seemed hostile to conventional agriculture. Her family had farmed marginal land in Norway's mountain valleys for centuries, accumulating knowledge about soil improvement, water management, and crop selection that could potentially succeed even in Montana's challenging climate. The homestead that Astrid claimed included our current 12-acre parcel, plus an additional 148 acres of similar terrain that offered slightly better agricultural potential, but still presented formidable challenges for successful farming. Previous homesteaders had attempted to develop portions of this land during the 1880s, but all had abandoned their efforts within 2 or 3 seasons, defeated by soil conditions that seemed to prevent normal crop production and livestock grazing. Astrid's agricultural expertise enabled her to recognize immediately that the soil problems plaguing our property weren't caused by natural conditions, but by human activity that had altered the land's normal geological composition. The rocky, mineral-heavy soil that prevented conventional farming showed clear evidence of excavation and backfilling that had mixed subsoil with surface layers, creating growing conditions that were hostile to most crop varieties. But Astrid also recognized that the same mineral content that made conventional farming difficult might create opportunities for specialized agricultural approaches that could take advantage of unique soil chemistry rather than fighting against it. Her Norwegian farming background had included experience with mineral-rich soils that required different techniques but could produce exceptional crops when managed properly. Astrid's first innovation was the development of terraced growing areas that worked with the property's natural drainage patterns while addressing the soil chemistry problems that had defeated previous agricultural attempts. Using techniques learned from mountain farming in Norway, she created a series of raised beds and water channels that improved drainage while concentrating organic matter in areas where crops could flourish despite the challenging mineral content. The terracing project required moving hundreds of tons of rocky soil by hand, using only basic tools
and the labor of her family members and occasional help from neighbors, who were initially skeptical about her unconventional farming methods. The physical demands of reshaping the landscape were enormous, but Astrid understood that success in marginal environments required infrastructure investments that might seem excessive but would provide benefits for generations. Astrid's agricultural innovations proved remarkably successful within 3 years of implementation. Her terraced growing areas produced vegetables that were not only abundant but exceptionally flavorful and nutritious, apparently benefiting from the mineral-rich soil that had frustrated previous farming attempts. The unique growing conditions created crops that commanded premium prices from restaurants and specialty food buyers in nearby towns. But Astrid's most significant contribution to our property's development was her construction of an extensive root cellar and food storage system that required deep excavation in the exact area where Blackwood's mining complex lay hidden. Working without any knowledge of the concealed chambers beneath her feet, Astrid dug storage areas that came within 5 feet of Blackwood's sealed mining shafts while remaining completely unaware of the fortune that lay just beyond her deepest excavations. The root cellar complex that Astrid constructed between 1897 and 1899 represented the most sophisticated food preservation system in their region of Montana Territory. The excavation extended 28 feet underground, creating multiple chambers for different types of food storage, while incorporating natural cooling and humidity control that kept preserved foods fresh throughout Montana's extreme temperature variations. Astrid's food storage system enabled agricultural success that amazed nearby farmers who had struggled to maintain consistent food supplies throughout the challenging mountain growing seasons. Her preserved vegetables, cured meats, and stored grains provided year-round nutrition security that freed her family from dependence on expensive imported foods while creating surplus products that generated substantial income through sales to local businesses and other homesteading families.
The success of Astrid's agricultural innovations attracted attention from agricultural extension services and farming publications that featured her techniques as examples of successful adaptation to challenging growing conditions. Her methods were studied and replicated by other homesteaders throughout Montana, establishing her reputation as one of the territory's most innovative and successful farmers. But Astrid's agricultural success was built literally on top of mineral wealth that would have made farming unnecessary if she had ever discovered Blackwood's concealed mining operation. Her root cellars were separated from chambers containing hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of gold ore by less than 8 feet of carefully arranged rocks and soil that Blackwood's military engineering had designed to prevent accidental discovery. The irony of Astrid's situation became even more pronounced when she began experiencing mysterious problems with her root cellar construction that suggested unusual geological conditions beneath her property. Several times during her excavation work, she encountered voids and cavities that seemed to indicate natural caves or underground chambers. But her focus on agricultural development prevented her from investigating these anomalies thoroughly. Astrid also noticed that certain areas of her property showed evidence of previous human activity that predated homesteading settlement in the area. She discovered scattered tools, metal fragments, and worked stone that suggested mining or construction activity, but the items were too corroded and incomplete to provide clear information about their origin or purpose. The most intriguing discovery was a collection of papers hidden in a metal container buried near one of her root cellar excavation sites. The papers appeared to be maps and technical documents related to mining activity, but they were written in codes and symbols that Astrid couldn't interpret. She preserved these documents carefully, hoping that someone with geological or mining expertise might eventually be able to explain their significance. Astrid's farming success continued throughout the 1890s and early 1900s, establishing her homestead as one of Montana's most productive and profitable agricultural operations. Her innovations in terraced farming, soil improvement, and food preservation were adopted by homesteaders throughout the region, and her property became a model for successful agricultural development in challenging mountain environments. But Astrid's success also created new challenges that would ultimately prevent her from discovering the treasure hidden beneath her feet. The demands of managing an increasingly complex agricultural operation left her with little time or energy for exploring the geological mysteries that she had encountered during her construction projects. The financial success of her farming eliminated the desperate circumstances that might have motivated more extensive excavation. Astrid's marriage to Wilhelm Gunther Thornburg in 1900 brought additional agricultural expertise and labor to the homestead, enabling further expansion of their successful farming operation while reducing Astrid's personal involvement in the physical labor that had led to her discovery of mysterious underground features. Wilhelm's focus on conventional agricultural expansion discouraged investigation of geological anomalies that didn't contribute directly to farming productivity. Astrid and Wilhelm's children, Ingrid Storm Thornburg, born in 1901, and Magnus Iron Thornburg, born in 1903, grew up on a homestead that had achieved everything that Montana agricultural settlement was supposed to accomplish. Their farm was prosperous, their family was stable, and their future seemed secure through conventional approaches to rural development and farming success. But the children also grew up hearing Astrid's stories about the mysterious underground features she had encountered during her construction projects, and they inherited her curiosity about the geological secrets that their property might still be hiding. Ingrid in particular developed an intense interest in geology and mineral identification that would prove crucial decades later when changing circumstances would create new opportunities for underground exploration. The agricultural success that Astrid achieved during her 30 years of development of her property established patterns of land use and construction that would influence every subsequent owner while unknowingly providing additional protection for Blackwood's concealed mining complex. Her terraced farming system created surface water flow patterns that helped maintain proper drainage for the underground chambers. Her root cellar excavations removed soil and rocks that made future deep digging easier while never penetrating deeply enough to accidentally breach Blackwood's concealment systems. Most importantly, Astrid's reputation for innovative problem-solving and successful agricultural development established our property's identity as a place where determined people could achieve remarkable results through unconventional approaches and persistent effort. This reputation would eventually attract Linda, another determined woman willing to pursue opportunities that others considered impossible or impractical. When Astrid finally decided to sell her homestead in 1925, she was 67 years old and ready to retire to town after 30 years of successful but physically demanding agricultural work. The property she was selling included not just 160 acres of improved farmland, but also sophisticated infrastructure, proven agricultural systems, and a reputation for productivity that made it attractive to buyers seeking established agricultural operations rather than raw homesteading opportunities.
The sale price of $2,400 represented enormous appreciation from the $14 filing fee that Astrid had paid for her original homestead claim, reflecting the successful transformation she had achieved through 3 decades of innovative farming and infrastructure development. But even this substantial appreciation was insignificant compared to the mineral wealth that remained hidden beneath the successful farm she had built unknowingly on top of one of Montana's richest gold deposits. Astrid's legacy extended far beyond her agricultural achievements to include the documentation and preservation of historical artifacts that would eventually prove crucial for understanding our property's hidden mineral wealth. The coded maps and mining documents she had discovered and preserved during her root cellar construction projects would eventually provide the keys needed to locate and access Blackwood's concealed mining complex. The detailed records that Astrid maintained of her excavation projects, soil conditions, and construction experiences would also prove invaluable decades later when modern geological surveys attempted to understand the unusual mineral patterns and underground features that characterized our property. Her documentation provided historical context that enabled professional geologists to interpret surface indicators and plan excavation strategies that could reveal concealed mineral deposits. Astrid Thornburg's 30-year agricultural success story proved that our property could support determined people who were willing to work with its unique characteristics, rather than expecting it to conform to conventional approaches. Her innovations in soil management, water conservation, and sustainable farming provided a foundation of knowledge and infrastructure that would benefit every subsequent owner, while never revealing the underground wealth that lay hidden beneath her successful farming operation. The homestead that Astrid developed through 3 decades of innovative agriculture was about to pass to new owners who would face different challenges and opportunities, but who would continue the pattern of achieving success through unconventional approaches and persistent determination that characterized everyone who had ever succeeded on this remarkable piece of Montana land. The underground treasure that had remained hidden throughout Astrid's farming career was still waiting patiently for the right combination of circumstances and desperation that would finally force someone to dig deeper than conventional wisdom suggested was necessary or practical. The morning of March 16, 2024, dawned clear and cold in Copper Ridge, Montana, with temperatures hovering around -18 degrees Fahrenheit. Perfect conditions for the excavation work that would either save our family's home or destroy the last remnant of Linda's 19-year dream of land ownership and independence. As Robert fired up the rented excavator and I helped Emma and Michael organize our hand tools for the basement construction project, none of us could have imagined that we were about to break through 140 years of carefully constructed concealment into one of the richest gold deposits ever discovered on private land in North America. Our excavation plan called for removing soil in carefully measured sections, beginning with the area furthest from our mobile home's main support points and working systematically toward the center, where we would eventually pour concrete footings that would solve our foundation problems permanently. Robert's construction experience had taught him that basement excavation beneath an occupied structure required meticulous attention to soil removal patterns that maintain stability while creating the access needed for concrete work. The first day of digging proceeded exactly as Robert had anticipated, with the excavator bucket efficiently removing the topsoil and subsoil layers that Astrid Thornburg had mixed during her agricultural terracing projects a century earlier. The soil composition was exactly what Linda remembered from her gardening work in 2005, rocky, mineral-heavy earth that was difficult to work with but had somehow supported 19 years of successful vegetable production and modest agricultural income. But as the excavator bucket reached depths of 12 to 15 feet, we began encountering the same mysterious voids and cavities that had puzzled Astrid during her root cellar construction projects. Several times the excavator would break through into open spaces that seemed too regular and structured to be natural cave formations, but too deeply buried and well concealed to be obvious signs of human construction. Robert's construction experience included enough mining-related projects to recognize that the underground cavities we were encountering showed clear evidence of deliberate engineering rather than natural geological processes. The voids were lined with worked stone and timber supports that had remained structurally sound despite more than 100 years of Montana's freeze-thaw cycles and seismic activity. On the second day of excavation, as we worked deeper into the area that would become our basement's northwest corner, Linda noticed something gleaming in the excavator bucket that looked different from the usual metallic flecks that had attracted her attention during her original property inspection in 2005. The gleaming material was more concentrated, more pure-looking, and embedded in quartz formations that suggested genuine geological mineral deposits rather than scattered surface traces.
Linda's instinct for recognizing valuable minerals, developed during her childhood in North Dakota farming communities where mineral rights had provided supplemental income for many farming families,
told her immediately that what we were seeing in the excavation bucket wasn't iron pyrite or other worthless minerals that commonly created metallic gleaming in Montana soil. The color, the weight, the way it reflected light, everything indicated that we were encountering actual gold ore of exceptional purity and concentration. The breakthrough moment came on March 18th, our second full day of excavation, when the excavator bucket punched through what we initially assumed was another natural cavity, but which proved to be the deliberately sealed entrance to Jeremiah Blackwood's concealed mining complex. The sound of the breakthrough was distinctly different from breaking through natural rock or soil. It was the sound of carefully engineered construction giving way after 140 years of perfect preservation. Robert immediately shut down the excavator and called for our entire family to examine what we had uncovered. The opening revealed by the excavator bucket was clearly artificial, a stone-lined shaft that descended into darkness with timber supports that showed the kind of precision construction that could only have been created by someone with professional engineering expertise. Linda was the first to descend into the opening, using a flashlight and rope safety system that Robert improvised from our construction supplies. What she discovered in that first underground chamber exceeded even her most optimistic theories about our property's hidden mineral potential. The chamber walls were lined with gold ore veins so rich and extensive that they gleamed like metal in the flashlight beam, and the chamber floor was covered with processed gold ore that Blackwood had extracted and stored pending future transportation to processing facilities. The first chamber was just the beginning of discoveries that would occupy our family for weeks of careful exploration and documentation. Blackwood's underground complex included 7 separate chambers connected by engineered tunnels with sophisticated ventilation systems that had maintained air quality for nearly 140 years, and a well-designed drainage system that prevented damage to the mineral assets due to groundwater influences. Each chamber served different functions in what had clearly been a major mining operation designed for long-term, large-scale ore extraction and processing. The main storage chamber contained approximately 847 pounds of processed gold ore that geological surveys would later value at over $43 million at current gold prices. But the processed ore represented only a fraction of the mineral wealth that Blackwood's mining operation had identified throughout our property. The chamber walls themselves contained gold veins that extended far beyond the areas that Blackwood had been able to excavate before being forced to abandon his operation. The documentation chamber proved equally valuable in its own way, containing Blackwood's mining records, geological surveys, and operational plans that provided detailed maps of mineral deposits throughout our entire 12-acre parcel and the surrounding areas. The documents revealed that Blackwood had identified gold ore deposits worth an estimated $200 million in current values, distributed through underground formations that extended well beyond the areas he had been able to develop before the Copper Ridge Gang forced him to abandon his work. Most remarkably, Blackwood's engineering expertise had created preservation conditions so perfect that his mining equipment, ore processing tools, and even paper documents remained in excellent condition despite 140 years of underground storage. The dry, stable environment that his ventilation and drainage systems had maintained proved ideal for preserving both mineral assets and historical artifacts that documented one of Montana's most significant but previously unknown gold mining operations. The discovery of Blackwood's concealed mining complex answered every question about the mysterious features that had puzzled property owners for over a century. The scattered surface minerals that had attracted Linda's attention were traces of ore that Blackwood had spilled during his concealment project. The rocky soil conditions that had frustrated agricultural development were caused by backfill from his mining excavations. The underground voids that Ostrid had encountered during her root cellar construction were access tunnels to chambers that she had missed by mere feet. But understanding the historical significance of our discovery was less immediately pressing than addressing the legal and practical challenges of claiming ownership of mineral assets that had been hidden for 140 years on property that had changed hands multiple times during the intervening decades. Montana mineral rights laws are complex, and we needed expert legal advice to determine our family's rights to treasure discovered on property that Linda owned, but that had been developed by someone else over a century earlier. The legal consultation process revealed that Montana treasure laws strongly favored property owners who discovered mineral assets through legitimate excavation on their own land. Blackwood's abandonment of his mining operation without filing appropriate claims had effectively forfeited his rights to the mineral assets, making them the property of whoever owned the surface rights when they were discovered. Linda's clear title to our 12-acre parcel gave our family unambiguous legal ownership of everything we had found in Blackwood's concealed chambers.
Professional geological surveys commissioned to evaluate the full extent of our discovery confirmed that Blackwood's original assessments had been remarkably accurate. The gold ore deposits that he had identified extended throughout our property in formations that would support profitable mining for decades, with total estimated values approaching $200 million based on current gold prices and extraction technologies. The immediate financial impact of our discovery was overwhelming in ways that our family needed months to fully comprehend. The processed gold ore from Blackwood's storage chambers provided liquid assets worth over $43 million that could be sold immediately to address our housing crisis and establish long-term financial security. The remaining mineral deposits represented wealth that could support our family for generations while funding conservation and educational projects that would honor both Blackwood's engineering genius and Linda's vision of sustainable land use. Linda's decision about how to develop our mineral assets reflected the same long-term thinking and environmental stewardship that had guided her agricultural innovations for 19 years. Instead of pursuing maximum short-term extraction that could damage the land and destroy the natural beauty that made our property valuable, she developed a conservative mining plan that would preserve environmental quality while providing sustainable income for decades. The mining operation that Linda established in partnership with environmental engineering consultants from Montana State University represented a new model for responsible mineral extraction that balanced economic development with conservation goals. The extraction techniques were designed to minimize environmental impact while providing educational opportunities for students studying sustainable mining and environmental restoration. The financial security that our gold discovery provided enabled Linda to establish the Jeremiah Blackwood Foundation, honoring the engineering genius whose concealment project had preserved our family's salvation for 140 years. The foundation provides scholarships for students studying geological engineering and supports research into sustainable mining techniques that can provide economic development without environmental destruction. Our property also became the site of Montana's first sustainable mining educational center, where students and professionals can study innovative extraction techniques that minimize environmental impact while maximizing resource recovery. The center uses Blackwood's original mining complex as a historical showcase while demonstrating modern technologies that can make mineral extraction compatible with conservation goals. The underground chambers that had hidden our treasure for nearly 150 years were preserved as historical landmarks that document Montana's mining heritage while providing unique educational experiences for visitors interested in understanding the engineering challenges and social dynamics that characterized frontier mining operations. Blackwood's perfectly preserved mining complex offers insights into 19th-century engineering techniques that are valuable for both historical research and modern conservation applications. But the most important transformation that our discovery created wasn't financial. It was the vindication of Linda's 19-year faith that unconventional approaches and persistent determination could create opportunities that conventional wisdom insisted were impossible.
The worthless land that everyone had mocked as Linda's foolish investment proved to contain wealth that exceeded the wildest dreams of families who had pursued conventional paths to financial security. The basement that we had been excavating out of desperate necessity became the foundation for a custom home that Linda designed to showcase sustainable living techniques while providing comfortable accommodation for our family and educational program participants. The new house incorporates geothermal heating, solar energy systems, and water conservation technologies that demonstrate environmental stewardship while providing luxury amenities that reflect our transformed financial circumstances. Emma, Michael, and I grew up understanding that we were the beneficiaries of both Blackwood's engineering genius and Linda's stubborn refusal to accept other people's limitations about what was possible for a family with more determination than money. Our education included not just conventional academic subjects, but also hands-on training in geology, engineering, environmental science, and sustainable development that prepared us to continue the legacy of innovation and stewardship that had brought our family from poverty to prosperity. As I stand today beside the restored entrance to Blackwood's mining complex, watching new groups of students explore the underground chambers that changed our family's destiny, I understand that the real treasure wasn't the gold we discovered beneath our feet. The real treasure was learning that sometimes the most valuable things in life are hidden in places that everyone else has written off as hopeless, waiting for people who are desperate enough and determined enough to dig deeper than conventional wisdom suggests is practical or worthwhile. Linda's $300 gamble on 12 acres of worthless Montana scrubland proved that faith in possibilities, combined with a willingness to work toward long-term goals that others consider unrealistic, can create wealth that exceeds any lottery jackpot or inheritance. The gold that we discovered was less important than the knowledge that conventional limitations often represent failures of imagination rather than actual boundaries of what can be achieved.
Thunder Creek Ranch's story proved that environmental stewardship and economic success aren't just compatible, they're mutually reinforcing approaches that create lasting value for families and communities. The sustainable mining operation that Linda developed generates substantial income while enhancing rather than degrading the natural resources that will continue providing value for generations yet to come. The foundation problems that had threatened to destroy our family's housing security became the catalyst for discoveries that ensured we would never again face financial uncertainty or housing instability. The crisis that could have made us homeless instead made us wealthy beyond anything we had ever imagined possible, while teaching us that the greatest security comes from understanding that determined people can create solutions when everyone else sees only problems. Jeremiah Blackwood's military engineering expertise had created the perfect conditions for preserving extraordinary mineral wealth until the moment when another desperate gambler would be forced by circumstances to excavate deeper than anyone had dared to dig before. Linda's intuition and our family's determination had provided the persistence necessary to discover secrets that had been waiting 140 years for people who refused to accept defeat when everyone else advised surrender. The worthless property that had been the source of community mockery and family ridicule for 19 years proved to be worth more than most people earn in several lifetimes, while teaching us the most valuable lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden directly beneath the places that everyone else has given up on as completely hopeless and beyond redemption.